And then just make sure everybody knows that you're in the right place. Today, we're really fortunate that we have two presenters. We're continuing our conversation all around investors, whether it's you wanting to be an investor yourself, or more specifically, today, we're going to really talk about you as an agent, identifying and cultivating those investor relationships. And we're really lucky to have Omar and Scott with us today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I've worked with and know both of them. And it's been several years now, and really admire what they are able to accomplish with investors in their space. So Omar and Scott, if you can each take a couple of seconds to, introduce yourself, give us some of your background, and then we're ready to just dive right in.
Sure. Scott, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So just a quick history on me. I've been licensed since 2016. Been with EXP now, just coming up on my 2-year anniversary. I cut my teeth in the REO and distressed property world. I've always just been working with investors. One of the things that was alluring about it is that even if you didn't have like an active client, like the typical homeowner looking for something, when you're working with distressed properties, you can always find buyers and sellers, because when people are looking at for investment purposes, you don't have to worry about timing the availability of a buyer, who actually needs to buy, or a seller who actually needs to sell. Whenever you find something that is a good deal in and of itself, you're able to create a transaction where otherwise one did not exist. In addition to that, the other alluring piece of that was that you're reselling that same property a minimum of 2 times, if not more. So that's kind of like my background, with this. Couple of accolades that have been achieved. I've been a Circle of Excellence winner every year since I've been licensed. When I was at RE/MAX, my final year at RE/MAX, I finished number 8 in the state of New Jersey. So working with the distressed property segment, it definitely is going to help your volume, your transaction count, and business also begets business. Now I started off on a team when I was a brand new agent, and I went solo after about 2 years, and then another year or so after that, I started building a team of my own, and now I'm up to 5 agents working with me, but I'm still buying and selling full time myself.
Awesome. Thank you, Omar.
Yep.
And how about you, Scott? Do some introductions.
Yep. So my background's a little bit different than Omar's. We obviously both work in the investor world now, but the way we both got here are from very different angles, right? Omar worked on the team with the investors. So I got my license in 2000, let me see, 15, 16. I got it in 2017. So a year after Omar. I had a background in mortgages for about 7.5 years. So when I came in, I already had a background of how the real estate process works. So when I came in as a solo agent, joined a RE/MAX office in Morristown, had a full-time job also. So between the 2 jobs, I was doing about 115 to 120 hours a week. My first year while having that job, and it wasn't even a full year, it was May to December, I sold 27 houses. And to be honest, the way I built it was really very social media driven, extremely social media driven. Didn't buy a single lead. I think my broker referred, it was my first or second deal to me. I think he felt bad. He wanted to give me, throw me a bone, and he did. So what I really did was build it based on social media. Every single showing that I went to, I showed, I would do a quick story of like, look at this gated community in Cinnaminson, hit me up. I'm out showing houses. I constantly showed that. And I, just like Omar, I've been a Circle of Excellence Award winner the whole time as well, every year. And then I forget where I was with RE/MAX, but hit some of those higher rankings like Omar did also. And have icon 2 years in a row now since being at EXP. We, most of us, not all of us, all came over together. So the way I got into the investor world was legitimately social media. I had a friend of mine that was a contractor that I was kind of trying to wait to build my business a little bit and make sure I was comfortable before I reached out to him. So I got my license in May. In August, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, Scott, I have an investor that I'm doing houses with. He absolutely hates his realtor. She put him in a really bad situation." And so we literally went to dinner that Friday night. He had a house in Audubon, said, "Hey, this is, I think the realtor quoted him at 250, 260 on a resale." I looked at it. I said, "You're at 205, 210. You're way off the mark." Next day, he fired his realtor, hired me. And I've been not his solo agent, but I do 90% of his properties for him. And then what that did was that expanded to other investors from there, because they were seeing that I was working with an investor on social media. We were acquiring houses. So I have 3 other investors that I work with on a daily basis. They don't do the volume he does. He's the main one that I work with, and his goal this year is 40 houses, acquisitions and resales. And so I've just built it off of that. So like I said, mine was a little bit different than Omar, as how we both essentially have kind of gotten to the same place, but very, very different directions and avenues of how we both got to the same place. So
Awesome. Thank you. So I think what's got everybody intrigued for today is understanding how they can take some of the strategies that have worked for the two of you and replicate that in their own businesses. So I totally hear what you're saying, Scott. 2 very different paths. So I would expect you have maybe some strategies that are similar, but also maybe some things that are different. Let's talk about how you continue to build investors into your portfolio, and then what's involved in keeping those investors happy. 2 important things.
So obtaining them as clients, if I really look back to the first investor that I got, like I said, I started off on a team, and I'll never forget the very first lead that I got was this little dump in Lindenwold. It was a $30,000 property. Now I'm a brand new agent. I've never sold a house before in my life. So my team lead says, "Here, call this guy back. He's calling about, 123 Main Street." And so I go out and I'm like, "Man, this place is a dump. Like, I've never shown a property before. This is my absolute first everything." You can see straight through to the sky because the roof is rotted away. There's soft spots in the floor, and so we're looking through, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I'm just highlighting, this property happened to be a duplex. I'm just kind of pointing out just the obvious things that I see, like, all right, this is in good shape. This obviously is in need of repair. And what happened was this was also his first stab at an investment property. He was looking to start picking up properties for a rental portfolio. So we both had our first real estate transaction together. So we were both just as green. So long story short, the guy, he sees that I'm being like completely honest and transparent with him. And, he buys the house, and, my cut on that transaction was $600. And that was the best $600 I ever made in my life. Because that guy proceeded to buy on average, like 10, 15 houses a year from me, from that first, crappy commission. So, where I'm going with that is that, this was my first volume client, and I still do business with this guy today, and he's moved on to much larger things now. His price point, has gotten much higher. He owns a car dealership. So sometimes we're looking at $1 million commercial properties together, plus all the referrals that come from it. So getting back into the root question of how do you find them? You need to always be prepared for when one comes across you. So what do I mean by that? Okay, you never know what random call you get. Somebody might be calling on something that looks like a turnkey house, but that person might be buying it as an investment property, or that person may be buying their primary residence, but they also happen to be an investor. So in order to be prepared for when the opportunity arises, you need to make sure that you are a perceived expert in the situation. Well, how do you do that? One is really, to me, is understanding numbers. I brag to my investor clients that I'll tell them not to buy a house faster than I'll tell them to buy a house. So why would I say something like that? Because I don't want an investor to get buried in a property and lose money, because if I'm the realtor, they're probably going to have a sour taste in their mouth about me. So winning somebody over, really understanding, okay, we always do reverse math. So starting with the ARV on a property, what's it worth? Whether it's going to be a buy and hold or if it's going to be a flip, you have to know what that ARV is going to be. Now, in real recent times, okay, we've seen several like almost overnight shifts in values. You know, the past couple of years, we've seen values skyrocket at a rate, you know, it's not seen at paces like that very often. And then all of a sudden with these rate hikes, then all of a sudden values softened a little bit. So what I also look at is trends in values. If we see that values are stagnant, values are going up, values are going down, you need to be able to anticipate these shifts to make sure that any of your clients are not going to get buried when you're setting an ARV. So second, having the more you understand about construction and renovation costs, the better. I was fortunate in being involved in renovations on multiple properties. So to go in and look at the square footage of a property and say, okay, here's what paint's going to cost, you know, how many dollars per square foot, what is flooring going to cost? What are different types of flooring going to cost? You know, what's labor going to cost? What's demo going to cost? You know, how tough is it to get permits in any particular town? And I could go on with different items that you need to be pretty familiar with. And the more familiar you are with any of these things, the better. These are all things that are going to be of value to a client. Now, at the end of the day, are you expected to know every single thing inside out? No, nobody's perfect. But even if you don't, you know, just get good at learning how to find the information and find the answers quickly. You know, it's just as simple as, hey, let me call you back in 5 minutes. Like, you know, I can touch base with someone, or, hey, you know what, I've got this in my notes somewhere. Let me look it up and call you back, and just give yourself just a couple minutes to find the time. So these are some examples of the ways that I've, you know, made myself more valuable and more marketable to investors, as coming across as that guy that is the expert on all things in investment properties.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what Omar is saying, I definitely do the same types of things as he does, is knowing, you know, paying attention to the market, knowing what the resale value is. I would say another key point, which I've learned, and actually a realtor that works with the main investor that I work with called me a couple of weeks ago, is you need to know your clients and know what their quality of finishes are as well, right? So if I very, very rarely send the same house to multiple people, right? I tend to kind of know what each one of my clients' niche is, and I'll say, all right, this is good for client X, this is client A, this is client C. But if I were to send the same house to all the three primary investors that I work with on flips, I quote all three of them a different number, because I know the quality of work that they do. Prime example, the main guy that I work with, I can tell you inside and out what he will do, what he won't do, what it'll look like, almost to a T without even going through the house. So he works with another realtor that's a wholesaler. So the wholesaler brings the deal to the table and says, I want the relist. So he works with him. I get that. That realtor called me a couple of weeks ago and said, Scott, I have this listing in Haddon Township with client X. I quoted him at this number. Then I went and saw the work that he did. I'm 40,000 under on the resale, and he's holding me to that number, and he's really pissed off at me. And I said, okay, so did you quote him? Because that wholesaler also does his own flips, and I know the quality he does is way different than this investor. Like, this realtor I know can get 50, 60,000 more for that same exact house that he sold to this investor. I said, so did you quote him when he was buying it based on what you would resell it for, or what his quality of work does? And he goes, I quoted it based off of what I do. And I said to him, I quote him differently on the ARV than I do other clients, because I know the quality of work. I know what he'll do. I know what finishes he'll put in are different than, I have another guy. If I was to send the same house to both of them, I'd probably quote the other guy 100 grand higher than this guy, because I know, like, he does stuff that blows my mind. Like, he rips walls out just because he's like, I'm not sure what's behind there and I want to see it. I'm like, Ken, you don't have to do that. Well, I don't care. I'm going to rip it open. So I know his quality of finishes, his work is way better than client X. So I definitely quote accordingly. And you can really get into a jam like that. Like Omar was saying, you know, I might send one house to one guy where I wouldn't send it to the other guy because I know that it'll work for him where it won't work for the other guy. And you don't want that. You don't want that reputation of jamming a house down somebody's throat to get the resale, right?
Right.
I've just picked up a new investor that he's working with another realtor that claims that he's an investor-friendly realtor, knows everything. 2 deals and he screwed them on both of them. And so he'll no longer be doing business with him. And he's coming to me because he knows, you know, my value of my experience of working with investors. So just be very careful when you are quoting that you get an idea of what type of finishes that client does, because it will make a big difference. It absolutely will.
Yeah, it does. I've got a property I'm sitting on right now with a newer investor, and you know, when I walk through, and I've walked through before listing the property with him, just to point out, you know, I mean, the paintwork is real sloppy. Like the floating floor installation is just real, like nothing's lined up right, and it's, you know, overall it just looks like someone's uncle that thinks they, you know, are handy, did it and probably drank a few too many beers while doing the rehab. And then there's others that they're just so perfect and polished. It's like you want to live there. So yeah, that's an important point, Scott, for sure.
So let me ask you, because we do have a couple of hands in there. And before
Yes.
Sarah and Jean, I've got the two of you. So let me just ask you a quick question, because you both talk about how you got started working with that first investor. For you, was it about getting that first transaction with them under your belt and sort of getting your sea legs, if you will, and then trying to work to expand the relationship? Or did you try and look at it from the word go as being something broader?
Well, for me, it was just a transaction period. So I didn't really have my sights set on an investor. So that was just complete chance. Now, once I saw the potential with that of ongoing relationships of like, okay, I only need to sell myself to this person once and then just not mess up going forward, which is the easier part. And so then I started developing sort of my isms in dealing with investors of, you know, how, like, why does this guy like me? And how do I then rinse and repeat with future investors? Did I cover the question?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. Sarah, you want to jump in with a question?
Hi, I have a question for Omar.
Yes.
You said when you first started, right? You
Mhm.
mentioned like you didn't know all the answers to the questions, and you always asked for them to give you a minute, and then you get back to them. Who did you
Yes.
lean into for your
A
answers?
lot. It depend. Ultimately, it would depend on what the question was. Sometimes it would be something that I would have references, like written references, or just something I could just pull up online. You know, I have a lot of friends that are contractors, so sometimes I could just pick up the phone and ask them. Now, fast forward to today, my team, just about all of them are I would say 4 out of the 5 work pretty heavily with investors. So what I let them know is that, look, like if you have a question on anything, I probably know the answer, because at this point, just with the number of transactions I've done and the sheer exposure to so many different situations and scenarios, I probably have already experienced it. And if not, you know, I've got a network of, we'll call it my brain trust. It could be realtors, it could be investors, it could be contractors, because it just, as many transactions deep as I am into this world, I've just made a lot of friends that if they have a question regarding real estate or value, or I have a question about, an engineering question, we all can just pick up the phone very quickly, shoot a quick text, and we will get the answers and the right answers very quickly. So it's something that, you know, always, it's okay to not know everything, but what's really important is learn where to find the answers that you don't know and find them quickly. And the quick blanket answer is, you know, be that your network.
Omar, are you with EXP?
Yes,
Do you mind sharing your phone number?
sure. It's
I'll throw it back on the screen too, at the end,
okay.
Sarah. I have emails and
Got it.
cell phones for both Omar and Scott, so I'll make sure that you
Yeah.
can take a screenshot at the end.
Thank you
Yes.
so
Awesome.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Jean?
What's up, guys?
You look so handsome in your headshot there,
Good
Gene.
morning.
You want me to go back? Because I'm actually outside walking the dog right now, and my glass is tinted from the sun. But you know, I just wanted to touch. I wanted to ask you guys this. So, over the last I don't know, 5-7 years, there's been so many people that all of a sudden became flippers overnight after watching so much HD TV. And, you know, me personally, my wife and I, we've done about 15 homes like in the last 5-7 years that we flipped. And I personally know, so Scott, what you said about, that was actually the first time that I heard that you quote, different, pricing for different people based on, and the quality of the work they put in, which is actually phenomenal. But I guess my question to you guys, I guess for everyone here, and we have a lot of newer agents, maybe in the business a couple of months to a year or two or whatever, aside from the visual when they're showing the property to, let's say, to an investor and they're new, is there anything specific that you can, help everybody out with as far as, I don't know, what can they look for when they're showing the property to know that, hey, this could be an issue where, this guy just, slapped, lipstick on Porky Pig and is trying to resell it to make a $20,000 profit. Because that's really becoming an issue with so many people just coming out of the woodworks and thinking they're becoming flippers overnight.
Yeah, there's a wholesaler that my main investor buys a lot from, and he had a listing down the shore and asked me to do it. And when I walked through it, I almost told him I wouldn't take it because that's exactly what he did. So you also want to be careful because it's your reputation on the resale side if people will show your clients' houses. So when I'm walking through, it's honestly, and Omar might be a little bit different, even Eugene. It's just like walking a retail buyer through, right? So you're looking at the foundation wall. You're looking at the beams in the basement to see if there's any mold, any condensation. You're looking for the knob and tube. You're looking at the roof. So you're looking at the same things, maybe a little bit more in depth than you would if you were with somebody that was looking retail. But I definitely still look for the same stuff regardless if I'm with an investor or an end user for the most part.
Yeah, and I would agree. Any flipped home that I go through, usually I've been in the house before it was renovated, and a lot of times with most of my investors, I'll usually pop in, just say hello as I'm out on the road, making my rounds and just checking out progress. And I always say to my investors too that I think it's helpful when I pop in not only during but when the rehab is finished, because when they're there day in and day out, their eyes start to become a little blind to blemishes that are there, or maybe it's a sense of personal pride where you don't want to see mistakes, and they're painting the portrait from their own styles. So getting in there and laying a second set of eyes, I'll see blemishes and imperfections or items of concern in a lot of cases quicker than maybe they'll see, because they're so hyper focused on knocking out certain items on the on the scope of their renovation. And before we list it, I always go through. I don't just throw it up without having walked through the house myself. I mean, that's critical, because if you're selling it, agents are calling you up and asking you questions, or buyers are calling you questions. You don't want to be seeing the house the first time as the buyer, because if there is an issue, at least you can get ahead of it. Like sometimes, I see plumbing issues pop up all the time because, okay, you could have all brand new plumbing, but there could be one little coupling that's just not on tight enough. Now somebody flushes the toilet a few times. Okay, now all of a sudden you have a water stain on the ceiling. So that's okay. Stuff happens. But as long as you are aware of it in advance, that lets you get ahead of it. Hey, just want to give you a heads up before you do the showing. If I'm talking to another agent, a leak just popped up. They're already on it. They've got the parts ordered. So then this way you're not caught with your pants down. And it's just in everybody's best interest.
Cool. Thank you, guys. I think ultimately just comes down to, just like everybody says, building relationships and knowing who you're working with. And, after a while, who the ones that are doing great work and who the ones that, maybe you should, be a little careful with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the investors will definitely lean on you, especially if they're newer. So the one that I just picked up that I'm trying to get my first deal with. So he wanted to see a house last week and I just could not get there to do it. And his contractor couldn't get there at the same time either. So I was going to set him up with one of my team members and he straight out said to me, he said, Scott, not being disrespectful to your team member, who happens to be my brother too. He goes, but look, Robert doesn't know what to look for. He doesn't know the cost of things. I really want you to come and look at it with you. So if you build that reputation and you learn the items and you learn that, hey, look, you could get away with a laminate flooring in this house, but this house, you need to have hardwood, or you need to have like a quartz counter in this one, but you can do granite in this one. Your reputation will get around. The people will see what you do and see that you know what you're talking about. The main guy I work with, so I'm a little bit different than Omar on his properties because he does so much volume. I used to walk through every house with him when he bought it for 2 hours. And then they wouldn't do anything I recommended. So I said, all right, cool. You guys make the decisions, let me know, and I'll be ready to relist it. But when I give him the ARV, I do put notes in there. Like I just sent him one today from a wholesaler that said, here's my numbers. If you redo it, you have to add a bathroom to get this number. His response is, what if I don't add a bathroom? Okay, well, here's my number without a bathroom. And then obviously hope that I can get above that number anyway, because then he'll be happier that he didn't put it in. But like with him, I stopped walking through houses because I was wasting 2 to 3 hours multiple times a week when they wouldn't do anything I told them to do, him and his contractor, where one of the other guys I work with, I go before he buys it, I go after he buys it, I go during the process, I go before we list it. So again, you get to know your clients, just like your retail buyers, if they're repeat clients, and you build the relationship and your services to them based on their needs, their wants. I think that's how I built it with this guy. And honestly, I think he loves the fact that I don't come to every house with him anymore, and he just does what he does. And then, again, I know how to comp him before he even buys it, because I kind of know, yes, he will open walls up in this one. No, he won't do it in this one. So I'm able to adjust for it before he even does the work.
So what are some of and I see Jennifer and Lynette, so we're going to come to you next, but what are some of the questions? So once you get going and you maybe have that first investor, you see opportunity for one transaction to lead to another. What are some of the best questions that an agent might frame with that investor to not only try to take this big picture to see this turn into multiple transactions, but also to make sure that they are right there front and center for the relist? Like, how do you set that expectation in a tactful way up front with questions?
Specifically for the relist, or just in general for just continued
in general,
maintaining the relationship,
understanding what that investor's motivations are, and then moving forward, how to best serve that investor?
So at the end of the day, I mean, people do business with people that they trust, that they like, that they respect. There's really not too much more beyond that. Obviously making sure that you're, looking to their financial interest is critical, because that's the number one reason that they're doing it, because they're looking to turn a profit. So, making sure that I'm always maximizing somebody's returns. So that again comes back to pairing the right house with the right investor, making sure they're buying it at the right price and being mindful of, market trends, or values going up or values going down, on what Scott had said, understanding what the financial return is going to be, using different materials, quartz versus granite versus formica, doing a laminate versus an LVP versus tile, wood, and all those things. Those are important. in addition to that, it's like if they call and they have a question, going back to something I said earlier, being that guy that has the answers quickly, and making sure that the information that you're delivering is correct. The last thing you want to do is give a piece of bad information. Now it ends up, biting you in the rear, because you didn't know what you were talking about. Those are really the important things. I mean, if they just need help with something, obviously within reason, I give it to them. And just letting them know that, look, if you like this one, if the whole experience was positive, they're going to keep coming back to you. It's like I'm not signing like exclusive agreements with any of these people. They just keep coming back. Why? Because I don't know that they could receive much better service or much better of an experience than I'm delivering. Am I the best that's out there? No, but I know that I'm in the top, of people that they could choose from. And as long as I just stay true to that and just always looking out for the best interests, and, if I have to make sure that I avoid them stepping on any landmines, it's that simple.
Yeah, and I would say based off of what Omar is saying too, if you hustle for them and you show them that you're there to work for them, they will stay with you. Like the main, I know I always go back to the main investor just because he's the one that I do the most volume with. There's a wholesaler, we've been trying to do deals with him for 3 years now, and it never works out. It just, whatever reason, they would sell it sight unseen. My guy won't buy sight unseen, so stuff like that. But the first time we met with them in person, the guy Mark said to my client actually brought it back to me and said, Scott really fights for you to get deals. We know they've never worked out, but he's always right there fighting for you. So what that does for me is when he buys with wholesale, I don't make a killing, right? But I make enough to cover my cost of my staff pulling an Oprah, taking care of the COs, scouring the internet for stuff, right? Because time is money at the end of the day. So I make enough to cover that. But the other thing too is he gets the same emails I do from these wholesalers, right? He doesn't call the wholesaler. He sends them to me. If I don't send them to him first and says, hey, I just saw this one, I want to see it. Because he could easily go to the wholesaler directly, probably save $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 and deal with them directly, but he doesn't want to deal with them. But because I bring the value of the negotiating, the back end, the contracts, the title order, the Oprahs, I do all that for him. And we actually do the COs for him too. Now, he reimbursed me for it, but that's just things he doesn't have to worry about at all. So he'd rather bring it to me negotiate it. Like we signed one yesterday, I'm making $1,000 on it. That stinks, but the wholesaler's only making $4,000. So it's not like the wholesaler's making 25,000 and paying me $1,000, right? It's all relevant. But then I just did one the other day that was a $500,000 purchase that I got $7,000 for. So it's all relative, and then I get the resale. But if you show them that you will work for them, bring the value of not only the properties but the service that you provide them, they will they'll keep working with you. He gives me everything that he does not buy with me, again, unless if it's with a realtor that brings it to him. So I probably get 5 deals a year that he buys on his own, whether from an attorney sends it to him, somebody calls him. I still comp it out for him. I actually still process it for him on the Oprah side, the pulling the title, the doing the CO. But my name's not on the contract. I don't deal with the seller. So I'm technically out of the transaction, but I give him the service of doing those things so that he doesn't have to do it on the deals that I don't make money on.
Awesome. All right, Jennifer, and then Lynette and Sarah, you have a question?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much. Sorry, my Zoom doesn't work, like the camera. So anyways, question for you. So I've been in the business now, realtor, for a year and a half, and I just got my first call from an investor a couple days ago. So I showed him 2 properties yesterday, both REOs. And so that, again, this is all brand new. So put yourself back in your brand new, self. And I was learning that there was one property that he really, really wanted to put an offer in. They were asking $149.9. But when I looked at the agent remarks, it said that according to the bank, you have to have it on the market for 30 days for any owner occupied first, right? And then after that, it can go to the investor. So
Mhm.
I called the estate agent just to confirm that. So don't want to sound shady, but is there any way of going around that? Or because he was just like,
No.
I'm ready, I have the cash. Like, how does that all work?
So with these various bank-owned properties, and just to kind of give you a little education into the why of that, some of the secondary lenders, so like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac are two of the bigger ones, and sometimes Wells Fargo might be a party to it, but it's generally Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I believe they're doing this to help bolster their image to the public. Or maybe it is truly a philanthropic type attitude that they're taking on these properties. But what they're doing is they have, for whatever the reasons, they have initiatives where they're trying to put these foreclosed homes back into the hands of homeowners first, and making it so that they're not bidding against investors. So it's basically a goodwill initiative of them trying to give back to homeowners versus just having it be a golden goose for investors, if you will. So that being said, that is coming directly from the seller. There is no circumvention on it. I can tell you a personal experience that I had. This is back in maybe like 2016. I had a buyer that was buying a Freddie Mac property, and for that one, I think it was like the first 3 weeks roughly was owner occupants only. So this guy calls. He comes out, he has his kids, they're running around like the little, I mean, their kids are like 5, 6 years old. They're picking their rooms, all excited. I mean, I'm like, there's no way that this is an investor. I just can't imagine that he would have had his kids groomed to sit here and do what they're doing. So then a couple months later, I see the property that I sold this guy, okay, was relisted. It was, fully renovated, and it was listed with another agent. Now I get a call from Freddie Mac. They're investigating me. They're like, "Hey, what's the deal here?" And I said, I'm just as shocked as you. So I went through the same story, saying how the kids were running through, picking out the rooms. And I said, look, not for nothing, he didn't list this house with me. And there's paperwork where they have to sign that they understand that if they misrepresent themselves as a owner occupant when they're really buying it as an investment property, they could have fines starting at $10,000. Some of them actually have jail time for deliberate misrepresentation. So you, on the realtor end, if you know that that person is not being honest in what they're representing, do not touch it with a 10-foot pole, because you could lose your license. You could get fined. I don't know that the realtor faces jail time in it, but fines and losing your license for sure. It's not worth it. And I can tell you they do investigate it. So, if I ever have one of my personal clients that's talking about trying to, beat the system, I very quickly talk them out of it. And I let them know, look, if you want to do that, like I can't be involved, because I'm not risking my license over one commission. I'm not going to do it. And in looking out for you as my client, I can't allow you to do that in good conscience.
And that's exactly what I told him. I did my research, and that's exactly what I told him. And he totally understands. So I said, it's available on the 30th day, we'll put an offer in. And then I guess my second question is, so this investor, his goal is to do like 10 rehabs and resells a year. And so in addition to the MLS, where else can I find these investment properties in South Jersey?
Link up with wholesalers, and that would be the big alternative right now. And outside of that, if you ever heard the phrase like driving for dollars, just looking for distressed properties, and just sending letters. There's memberships that you can get where you can get phone numbers, email addresses, for any particular property. One of the ones that I use is Mojo. It's an auto dialer, and then they have add-ons that like a geofarming add-on where I could plug in any geographic boundary or specific address, and any emails, names, phone numbers that are tied to that property are curated through that service. And there's other ones out there as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, on the bank owned stuff, some of them are 14 days and some are 18 days, and it's usually owner occupant, government, and nonprofits can bid on them during those periods.
Okay.
And then I would advise this, and I think Omar would agree with me. If you're going to work with wholesalers, you need to make sure your client knows that they don't really have control compared to buying something on the MLS. The wholesaler does. So you're normally using their title company. And then if you start to get the reputation of signing a contract and then breaking it, the wholesalers will stop working with you. Because
Yeah, they'll cut you out fast.
yeah, and they all network together every
Mhm.
single week. So they all know each other. I have wholesalers ask me, be like, do you know this realtor? She's horrible because she keeps bringing these people and they keep breaking contracts. One of the things that I've done is any wholesaler I've worked with, I don't want to jinx myself, right? Some would. We've closed on 100% of the contracts that we've signed. We haven't even gone back and asked for a price reduction. Like when my guys come in, they come in with their number and they know that that's what they're going to close at. And I make sure my investors are well aware right from the beginning before I even call a wholesaler to go look at one of the houses for them, because they get usually one shot to look at it. And you can't bring 6 people with you either. Like you're bringing the investor and maybe his contractor, and that's it. It's a different world. So if anybody has questions on working with wholesalers, I know Omar does, I do. I think both of us are pretty proficient in that world and obtaining properties through them.
And Scott, you touched on a great point, is that you really have to vet the buyers to deal with a wholesaler. It's kind of a fast and furious situation where it's like you go in, there's no due diligence, there's no nothing. It's like once you sign the contract, it's no takebacks, and your reputation is at stake as well. So, there's certain buyers that I won't even entertain a wholesaler because I know that buyer, if they have a history of, getting cold feet or then trying to negotiate credits after the fact, I will no longer become good as an agent for anybody that I represent if I start bringing buyers like that to the wrong situation. It's a faster moving situation, and that buyer just really has to be vetted to proceed in that manner. And it's, like you said, Scott, you know your buyers. If they're used to it, great. If not, you got to vet them on it and just be crystal clear. Like, look, like you get one shot. And if you renege, like that's it, like you're out.
Yeah, and like Omar said, it moves super fast. We had a property we're supposed to look at 4 o'clock yesterday. So this wholesaler, a bunch of them send me stuff before they even market them to anybody because they know we'll close. So at 11, we set up the appointment for 4 o'clock. At 12:45, he texted me and said it's gone. I showed it to one other person and they took it on the spot. So it moves extremely quick. We looked at one at 2:30 yesterday. The wholesalers called me 3 times since we've been sitting here saying, what's your number? Are we putting this together? Because if not, I'm pushing it out to everybody in an hour. So just be prepared for that. It's a different world. And as long as you prepare your clients and they understand and you understand what you're getting into, it can be very lucrative. You just have to understand it.
It's just a different gear that you're driving in is all.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, and then we'll proceed with Lynette. But on that point, when you say specifically, so understand a lot of people that are tuning in, they're looking to get that first start. So when you say link up with wholesalers, give us specifics. What does that mean? Where do you find wholesalers? How do you get that research and make that initial connection?
Social media, they're all out there.
That's exactly where I was going to go.
But the other thing is, like Scott had already said, this is that a lot of them, they're all friends with each other, just kind of like, the busiest real estate agents. We all have done business together because it comes down to volume and the circles that you run in. If you meet one and you have a good reputation, and I'm pretty sure Scott already said this, is they tell their friends because they're constantly buying and selling houses to and from one another. So, reputation is critical. A lot of times there's various like networking events. Lately, it seems that a lot of these higher volume wholesalers have been hosting events. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. But it's a good way to get in and meet them. And, pre-COVID, I wasn't a big fan of doing open houses. After COVID happened, I do as many as I can. And one of the reasons for it is the networking involved, going out and actually meeting agents. If you've met someone, you have some sort of common ground and you have a good reputation, or I'm sorry, a good interaction with the person. When you're on the other side of a transaction with that person, everything just seems like it runs a lot smoother because you're not putting walls up, you're not anticipating a problem. I think your whole demeanor is different because now you've become friendly with that person in advance. And I think going to some of these networking events, regardless who's there, whether it's, lenders, title, realtors, wholesalers, just becoming friendly with people just makes business so much smoother, in my opinion.
You're building your Rolodex.
Yeah, and one thing I do is when I meet a new wholesaler, I'll ask them, like, I know Omar knows Justin Johnson. I do a lot with him. I'll be like, hey, do you know Justin over at Elite? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, well, you can ask him about me and my client. We've closed on 100% and we've done whatever, 20 deals in the past year and a half. And they'll call each other and say, oh, do you know Scott Zielinski and his client? And Justin will be like, yeah, we do a lot with them. They close on everything. They're easy to deal with. And
Yeah.
like he even gives me properties at a lower number than what he could actually get because he knows that we will close and that we come through on what we say.
Interesting. Okay, Lynette, you've been so patient. You have a question?
Good morning, thanks. I have a question. Do you guys ever invest in a pre-listing inspection where the inspector might check out things that weren't necessarily on your repair list?
For like a retail buyer or a retail listing or
Listing.
like with investors?
Yes.
I don't know about you, Omar.
I'm not a fan of it, because if the buyer, if I'm sorry, the buyer's going to get an inspection anyway, and you don't want to have a seller go and like throw a bunch of money at stuff because like they were maybe afraid of something. Now, if the seller wants to get one themselves, like fantastic, but I haven't really seen any scenarios where I feel it's worth implementing. And again, that's just my opinion on that. Whatever, tell someone no, but I'm not encouraging it either.
Okay. Thank you.
About you, Sarah?
Hi. So I'm still new at this. I'm still trying to learn. I do have two investors that I'm working with. One is experienced, so I kind of like learn from him, and the other one is very green. But they're looking for two different things. So my question is, how do you evaluate your investor? When you meet an investor, do you have certain questions that you do ask to know what kind of investing property they're looking for? Or some people, they want to do like soft flipping. Some people are okay to look at a house that's just bones.
So, sorry, just a quick question, Omar, before you jump in. When you say that, Sarah, are you talking about two different investors that both want to flip, or one wants to buy and hold and rent it and the other one wants to flip, I guess?
Exactly.
So you have one that wants to buy and hold and one that wants to flip?
Yeah, and the one that wants to buy and hold, he doesn't mind maybe fixing the kitchen, maybe like ripping out the carpet and putting a new carpet in, like very soft cosmetic work.
Omar, you can jump in on that because you deal with more people that buy and hold than I do.
So yeah, almost anytime I'm working with an investor for the first time, not very different than doing a consultation with with a home buyer is, I want to find out what repairs are they comfortable undertaking and what are certain things that they want to avoid altogether. That's an important one. And other things that I want to know is, how large of a property can they handle? If you're doing 1,000 square foot rehab, let's say it's a 3-bed, 1-bath rancher versus doing a 3,000 square foot house with, 4 bedrooms, 3 full bathrooms. Okay. The purchase cost is going to be higher. The renovation cost is going to be higher. The holding costs are going to be higher. The amount of time in the project is going to be higher. So, I want to make sure if a person's doing their first property, I don't want somebody to grab like a 4,000 square foot house the first time, I want that person doing something smaller, like medium, small in size the first time, because if they make a mistake, the ramifications are going to be smaller as compared to taking on like a larger project where they have to sink more money and more time and more materials into, for sure. So where we're at a crossroads where we have some houses are city water, city sewer, and then we also down. I'm down in Sewell, in Gloucester County. There's a lot of houses with like well and septic and oil and propane. So some people are scared to death of septics. I can't tell you how many houses I've sold with like septics and with wells, and I've taken investors that used to be scared of them and showed them how to navigate waters with them as, okay, should you avoid houses with septic or well or oil? Like, no, but here's how you navigate in those circumstances. And maybe it wasn't their first house, okay? But now if someone grew up around those things, they're completely fine with it because that's just part of everyday life for them, and it's not scary or intimidating to them. But knowing, I'll ask questions of an investor like, are you GCing your own work, or are you paying for everything all together and all you do is write the check? Because that makes a big difference, because it's going to cost them more money to have to pay a GC versus someone who's there on site. Like one of my oldest investors, she is hands-on on every project that she does, and her labor costs are so low because she doesn't have to worry about the contractors not showing up and taking longer than they have to or making mistakes, because she's there. So they can't skip a day of work and demand payment for it because she's on site. So I can give her deals that might seem a little skinnier because her labor costs are so low and her craftsmanship is excellent. Other things to consider is, is that investor purchasing using true cash, or are they using hard money? If they're borrowing in any way, shape, or form, their costs are going to be higher, because now an additional expense in the rehab is the cost of borrowing money. So these are all, these are a lot of the questions that I'll ask of a person when getting to know them and figuring out, okay, what property can I pair with that person? If I have a person that likes to rip everything out, they do all high-end finishes and they borrow money, okay, I know their rehab costs are going to be higher, and their ARV might be a little bit higher as well. So these are all kind of like the moving pieces that you need to take into account when pairing an investor with any particular property. And repeating something Scott said is that I don't always send the same properties to every investor, because they all have different wants and needs, and something might be perfect for one and completely wrong for another based on that individual.
Do you have your own vendors? Like, do you recommend your vendors to them?
I've got a lot of contractors that I have access to, and that's another thing that I ask them is, do you have somebody for XYZ? They might have maybe 3 or 4 of the contractors that they need, and then outside of that, if there's anything missing that they need, at this stage in the game, I usually have multiple referrals for whether it's plumbing or sheetrock, roofs, dropping additions, doing septic, doing wells, all of that, and that's just been amassed from time.
And lenders too?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Giselle, how about you? Your question?
Hi guys, good morning. Great call so far. So my question is, when you're dealing with wholesalers, so I haven't done a wholesale deal or deal with a wholesaler. So in terms of writing up a contract when you are representing the investor, we have language in there that says that the contract is not assignable. How do you bypass that, or are you just doing like a letter of intent? And how is the fee even broken out? Is it in the additional provisions? I know it's a little technical, but that's one of my questions.
So are you speaking from the angle of you're representing the buyer?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Omar, up there, they write contracts for offers, so it's a little bit different than we do, right? So, and I think Omar does the same. I allow the wholesaler to write the contract,
Right.
and then just make sure they put in there, because they have the contract with the seller, right? Now they're doing an assignment contract. So I just make sure that they put in there commission for Scott Zielinski to EXP in the amount of 4,000, 2,000, whatever it is. But we don't, we're South Jersey, right? As everybody knows, it's two worlds. We don't write contracts as an offer, and wholesalers usually don't want that. They just want to know what you're
The
offering.
amount.
I actually don't even send proof of funds to wholesalers, to be honest with you.
Really? Okay. All right. And that, well, I guess I'll piggyback on that, on the wholesalers. How do you know if they're direct to seller, right? How do you know that they're legit? Because I get some of these wholesalers that send me stuff constantly and I'm like, do you have a contract? And then I get like zero information from them. So
You're getting the daisy chain.
yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
so how do you identify who to work with and who not to work with so that you exclude the trainers? Because basically that's what I'm asking them.
I mean, I think ultimately, like referral experience, we tend to deal with the same ones repeatedly. And I get, there's a new one born every hour. So if somebody's new and has no track record, I will certainly have my guard up and want to do some due diligence before just, writing a non-refundable certified cashier's check to someone. So yeah, definitely you want to vet the wholesaler, like see what you can learn about the person. I'm not really a fan of new ones, and so I'd rather let someone else test the waters first so that, myself or my clients don't have any exposure or liabilities.
And I think the other thing too, Giselle, with the daisy chainer. So for those of you that don't know what a daisy chainer is in the wholesale world, you'll have wholesaler A have a property under contract with the seller, and then wholesaler B will market it out as theirs, right? So it's marked up once and then it's marked up twice. It can be marked up like Philly. I've seen it like literally 5 assignment fees, right? Philly's like the Wild West. So you start to learn who they are. Like there's one guy that keeps sending my investor all these properties, and then an hour later, I'm getting them from the actual wholesaler that has them. So like he stopped going to that guy's showings on houses. Like there's one in Sicklerville that Justin Johnson ended up flipping, but like this other wholesaler sent it to my client. My client went and looked at it with them, and the same time he was there looking at it, the wholesaler that actually had it sent it to me. So then we just bypassed the other wholesaler and went directly to the wholesaler that has it. So now he won't even deal with them. So you just get to know the reputations. Follow on Facebook. There's a lot of like investor, or I think it's like REI investor groups. There's a ton of them, and you'll see who's legit and who's not.
Yeah, because people talk, and it's a relatively small circle. So if you're a knucklehead, word will get out fast.
Yeah, and for the, I guess, agents that are in North Jersey, a lot of hard money lenders up here, they host events too with wholesalers and rehabbers. So you can go to those networking events, like Glenn Gallucci always has one, and I think Joey Chan always has one. So, for the agents out there, they can sign up to their groups and, attend those events and go network.
Yeah, and there is a difference in hard money between hard money with a bank and hard money with a private person, right? So the main guy I work with, he has like a $7 million hard money line with a bank, and not with a private investor. So there's no mortgage contingency. So I sell it as cash. Like we've never not closed on it. All they do is like, if they think the ARV is different than what my client thinks it is, they make them put more money down at the closing. So normally he puts like, I think 20% down at the closing. If they think it's not going to sell for what he thinks it's going to sell for, they might make him put 40% down at the closing so he has more skin in the game. So.
Thanks, Scott. That's really good too, because I think that's a big question. Understanding sometimes hard money, you do put it in as a cash offer, as opposed to with financing. So awesome. Thank you. Michelle, it's good to see you here. You have a question?
Yes. So 2 things. The girl that had brought up, Lynette, she had brought up about the pre-listing inspection. This is just a sidebar, but I always get a certificate of occupancy inspection. I know a lot of people are against that, but I feel as though if you get a certificate of occupancy prior to listing a property, that'll bypass a lot of issues that could come up. Because let's say hypothetically, you got a seller full price, and then all of a sudden they do a CO, and now they already negotiated repairs, and now they're out like another 5,000, hypothetically, and then now you look like the bad guy because now you just, cost them another 5,000. I learned that like years ago because Wes Westville, for whatever reason, there were pets in the property and they made me replace the carpet in the whole entire property. So I know it's also a good thing for the sale so that you could tell the realtors, like, we already have the CO, we're ready to go. We just need you to, move forward and, do that. A lot of people don't do that, but I'm a weirdo. I always do that every time. Okay, that's
That's a
number one.
great one.
Number two, a lot of people in my office think I'm a crazy person. And again, the seller does pay for the inspection and all the repairs. But what I'm saying is prior to the listing, as soon as I know that they're going to be listed, because usually at the listing appointment, you still have a week or two where they're going to do some nitpicky things to get it ready for the sale and this and that. In the meantime, it's very easy for them to just go to the township, apply for the CO, bang it out, saves you a lot of stress and unnecessary problems in the future. So anyway, that's something that I do. In addition to that, my question is, back in 2018, I was working for Brian Zingafus and we were doing bank-owned properties all the time. We had a couple people, about 5 people, I would say, that were loyal and were constantly putting in offers all the time. And back to what Scott said, sometimes he has a client where he kind of knows, like, he'll do this price based on what renovations, and this client will be doing that. And he's obviously a lot busier and has a lot more business than me. But from little old me, I had a situation where I was putting in offers left and right. And then certain people, let's say, would win the offer. And then as soon as it closed, they would see that I was, closing with this particular person. Now, granted, their terms were better, the buyer was better, they were always cash and had better terms. And it almost looked like I was favoring said investor. Obviously, right now, I don't have that situation, but in the future, when that comes back, I was wondering how Scott and Omar would handle something like that, since they deal with a lot of investors, and how you circumvent that, because I was getting to the point where I was actually putting them under different names in my office and be like, oh, somebody else got it, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to tell you. And to circumvent that, but I know that's not probably the best practice. So I was wondering how you guys would handle a situation where even if you had 2 investors that were going to put a property under contract and put an offer in, how you would kind of, get over that obstacle, I guess is my question.
So you mean if you have 2 clients bidding on the same property?
Yeah, like say, no, I'm just
That,
going back to investors. So say you
yeah.
get like 20 investors under your repertoire, and then all of a sudden, you're working with said investors. Let's just say hypothetically, 2 of them or even 3 or 4 of them are always constantly working with you, and
Mhm.
this one investor, say, constantly wins. How
Yeah.
would, and then the other investor gets salty, right? Because he's like, oh, like, you're favoring this other guy. How come I see your name, a couple months down the road, they're following up on you and seeing that you're closing on all these deals with the said investor. Like, how do you circumvent, like, proving that it's really not favoritism? It's just that that particular buyer obviously has better terms. So how
Well,
do
do you
you,
have
I don't
a
want to lose that client either. You know what I'm
right?
saying?
So you have a paper trail then of what the offers were of the losing bidder, correct? Well, that's it right
Right.
there.
But I'm
What
just saying,
was
like, yeah, but I mean, eventually they're going to just think that, like, I had this happen to me where, like, the person just thought I was favoring this one particular investor. It wasn't true. Just his, and I told him that, but he just moved on because he thought I was lying. So I was just curious if you ever encountered a situation like that. Or even I have had friends that I've showed houses to, even on the normal sale, where the same
Mhm.
thing has happened, where another client that could be a stranger to me has won, and they're like, like, because they think they should get inside information, or because they're your friend and you have to keep it, business. So, and you don't want any liability. So I was just kind of curious, like, kind of like a twofold question, like how you would tackle that.
Right. So, well, after I've had this happen maybe once or twice, and this was a retail listing, and I had 2 people that were bidding on the same house. Now there was almost like a $50,000 difference in the bid amount, and when ultimately when the property sold, the person that lost out, like they saw that, like, look, they weren't even close, and that was their
True.
best and highest in that situation. So at that point, it's like, look, like, you didn't have the best offer. You're not making the offer for you're delivering the offer, but at the end of the day, their best and final, or whatever their chosen terms to deliver, is their final decision, not yours. So if they're just not delivering the best offer, that's not your fault. And if they want to try and blame you for it, then you know what, maybe that's a sign that you just dodged future bullets from that person. If they're going to attack you
True.
because they're trying to blame you because they're not delivering a better offer, that's not your fault. And maybe it's just you probably just I just would take that as a sign that you dodged a bullet.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had it happen, and when that happens, I tell both clients the same exact thing. Like, I don't say to one client on the investor side, that's different, right? But on the retail side, I don't say, oh, this house is really worth 210, so you should offer 200. And then I tell the other client, this house is worth 240, you should offer 230. I just make sure whatever I tell both clients, because I've only had it happen a couple times, and it's usually my team members. It's not usually
Right.
me. Like Lisa will have a buyer and Angela has a buyer for the same house. I just tell them to be honest, and I tell the person the same thing across the board.
I think just with the investors, like the spread might be like 5,000, like back in the day, like in 2018, 19, it was like, property might be like 90,000 and people are putting offers between like 95 and let's say 110, and the spread might be like $3,000, and it's like over and over and over. And I think they might have thought I was giving them, inside information, which obviously I wasn't, because you know what I mean? So you're going to disappoint somebody. And at the end of the day, they are going to see that it's in there at a lower price. But when I'm trying to get a bunch of investors, they're obviously going to go after hopefully the same property, and then it's kind of like, like, what do you
And I
do?
think if you can keep your investors full with inventory, it's not going to happen as much.
Okay,
Right.
cool.
So like I have one that wants 30 to 40 a year. So as long as I keep feeding him stuff to kind of keep up with his pace, my other guys are, two of them want 3 to 5 a year, and one wants like 7 to 10. So as long as I keep them with inventory so they can keep working, and then this guy keeps going, you shouldn't run into it as much as you want. And yeah, I mean, it's awesome that you have a goal of 20 investors, but you might rethink that when you figure out what the headaches are with 20 of them.
And then one question for Deanna. Sorry, just one off subject question. So Scott had mentioned about a client or a realtor, sorry, that had lost a listing because his budget was like 40,000 under blah 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 blah. So my other question is, on the flip side, wouldn't that kind of be like, I understand that you guys have great resources, and you're blessed that you can, give your investors these vendors and stuff like that to go out and give estimates. But like Deanna, from like a liability standpoint, do we get into any kind of issues with that where, somebody could be like, oh, well, you gave me this budget and now I'm under 40,000, blah, 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 blah. Like, would that be? And when we give too much advice, like I was always told way back, like even in broker school, like you give them the resources, it's up to them to do their investigations, up to them to do the work, because then you can get pulled into it, blah, blah, blah. So would that be a situation where like liability would come into play, or has nobody ever really seen that?
I think there might have been a little misunderstanding. I definitely wouldn't go quoting like hard figures on a rehab. Ultimately, like one of my classic phrases when I'm talking to an investor about a particular property, we walk the property together and I'll ask them like, what do you think your rehab budget is here now that you've seen it, knowing who you're using? Now, if they have no clue, I'm always going to way overestimate. And again, I'm still going to use the word estimate, ballpark, range, but ultimately get a contractor in here to put that number, to set that number in stone. I'm just giving you a range, okay? And that's just based on what we can see right now. Now, the second you start opening up walls, you could see that, a main beam needs to be replaced because it's riddled with termite damage, or it's like rusted through, or so these are all, your verbiage. Make sure that nothing is like, oh yes, that is going to cost exactly $8,540. Like never, ever, ever make a statement like that. Unless you're doing the work yourself and it's your company and you're putting that guarantee and you're going to take it on the chin if it costs more. So yes, the way you phrase things is hypercritical.
I
And
think the other
I
thing.
always try to way overestimate too.
Yeah. Yes. You're always safe that way. But going the other way around, you'll lose your reputation fast.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just maybe ask Omar and Scott, just appreciating where you're coming from, Michelle, think of a traditional transaction where you should be offering up multiple names for other vendor type services to the transaction. So if you're new in your investor relationship and you maybe don't have quite the rapport that you're looking to achieve just yet, make sure that you're giving multiple options, that you're putting it back on the investor to do their due diligence to determine what vendor they ultimately want to work with. I think, you could probably narrow that down. Like I said, once you develop that rapport and trust, but initially I would say if you're worried about liability as you establish that, get the more options and the more cushion you put into your estimate, to Omar and Scott's point, the better. Awesome. How about you, Pankaj? Did you have a question?
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I just have a quick question. I don't know if this question has been asked earlier or not, about buy and hold. I'm a relatively new agent. I'm looking to get something into investment in terms of buy and hold. It's personally for me. I wanted to find out, how do you evaluate what's the right investment in terms of buy and hold? I mean, that gross rental yield, what should be the right number if I'm looking to do an investment in terms of buying and renting, you know?
So that's a personal question. And everyone, you have to consider, right, how much money am I going to put out and what is my personal expectation of how much money I'm looking to get as a return? Now, when I'm discussing like buy and hold strategies, whether it's something I'm thinking of for myself or for an investor, I ask them, what are your objectives? Like, what are you seeking to gain from this? Are you just looking to gain a portfolio? Are you looking for something that is more long-term appreciation, or are you looking for something that has a higher amount of front-end cash flow? Now, everyone's like, well, both. Well, that isn't always going to be the case. And, just kind of taking a cue from some very successful landlords that I know that have like 40, 50, 60 properties. One in particular that I do a lot of business with is that most of the properties that he bought on the front end were just for front end cash flow. So typically you go into, you want to look at, okay, what zip codes can I buy properties at, and 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom is fine. And then you have to look at what's the rent going to be versus what it's going to cost me to get it. You have to look at what are your taxes going to be. Is there an HOA? What items aren't you responsible for if it's like a condo or a townhome or anything like that? So, figure out what your overhead is on any particular property versus what the rent is. And then that's how you quickly figure out where your cash flow is going to be. Now, so this one like high volume like landlord and investor I've been working with for a long time, he bought everything just based on front end cash flow. Then once he hit a certain point, he had almost like 40, 50 rental properties that he was making a lot of money from on a monthly basis. Then he started buying things where the cash flow wasn't as substantial, but the appreciation curve was tremendous. So most of his rental properties he would spend maybe $30,000 to $50,000 on and profit, $500 to $1,000 a month. So then he started buying properties down the shore. Now, instead of 50,000, now you're talking 5, 6, 700,000. The cash flow was the same as these little like townhomes that he bought locally, but the appreciation, he's seeing like $100,000 a year in appreciation. So the answer to your question is, first, you need to think about what is most important to you. Like, what return are you looking to get, whether it's cash flow or appreciation, or are you just looking to dock money for tax purposes? I've got investors that are doing that are actually okay having the rent be lower than the overhead just for sake of just, reducing for tax advantages. And I threw a lot of information out there. Did any of that help?
Yes, it does. It does actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you for that question, Pankaj, because that's a great segue to next week. That's one of the things that our guest next week, Joe Colella, will talk about, is actually if you as the agent want to dive into the investment world yourself, what are some strategies that you might consider, as best practice to get started and to understand a good deal and then how to manage that deal. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see, Rochelle, you have a question? And guys, are you okay to go for a few more minutes, Omar and Scott?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, how are you? Actually, I may just wait. I should probably wait till next week because I think that's what you're talking about, right? Getting more into like the nitty gritty and as far as like what would they recommend for a first time? I mean, I could just ask it real quick. What would your recommendation be for like a first time investor? Is it better to partner up with a seasoned investor and shadow them? And I guess my other question is, I'm assuming we should have like a pool of contractors that we know and like that could work on projects with us. But again, if you want to table this for next week, we can do that too.
So on the contractor side, I actually, with my investors, stay away from that. I let them choose who they want to work with. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've got my plumber, my electrician, a septic guy, like I have that stuff. But as far as general contractors, like, my one guy, his GC only works for him. will not work for anybody else, will not do, he gets calls all the time about doing retail work, and he's like, I hate people, I don't want to deal with their personal homes, I'm only going to work for you. Then I've got another investor that he is a general contractor, right? So I would say if you can find somebody like that, they're who you want to work with, because they're not going to call you asking you for, how about this person? Oh, well, now he just charged me $2,000, but I could have gotten it for $1,000 over here, right? And I definitely tell them to do their own due diligence on who they're going to hire. But I guess maybe I've just gotten lucky with who I've gotten connected with, where I haven't been asked like, I need a GC, because every investor out there, and I think Omar sees it as much as I do, I always see posts going, I need an investor-friendly general contractor. I need an investor-friendly plumber. Well, they're going to send them one deal. They're not going to get a discount for it, right? But the investor is going to complain that I paid retail. So I tend to stay away from recommending contractors to investors. I have them if I need them in my back pocket, but I tend to stay away from that.
But if we're doing our own, just say flip, is it bad to, like, I don't want to say poach. I mean, I know a couple of investors, but so I would want to talk to those investors to see who their investor friendly GCs are, just to kind of get to know who those people are. I guess that's my question.
So you're just looking for referrals from people. Is that
From investors, then I guess, right?
right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask around to, realtors, investors. I mean, if you're just strictly looking for a referral on something, that's just as simple as just asking around.
Yeah.
And do you
And I
think it's
know,
better to
like-
partner up with a seasoned investor first, if you were interested in doing flips?
It's not a bad idea to do that, going on a partnership with someone, at least on the first or maybe the first few. And there are investors I know that I know personally, investors I've worked with that will do that from time to time. Sometimes they'll do one with a friend to show them the ropes. Sometimes they'll do them themselves. So, it's obviously you're splitting profits, but you're also splitting, costs too. So it's there's certainly a benefit to be had from that. I wouldn't steer you away from taking that approach.
Thank you.
And I would say definitely pick and choose who you work with on that, because like my main investor, I would never buy in with him. Never. It would end so bad. I just know that because I know him. I know his personality. But there's another guy, like if I wanted to do one, but I didn't have let's just say I didn't have all the funds to do it. I'd be like, hey, I found this house. It's something I want to do, but I want some financial help or whatever the case is, or just to learn. I would approach him in a heartbeat. So again, it's knowing your clients and who you would feel comfortable working with. I mean, the main guy I work with, he's always asking me if I know people with money that want to invest and be a silent partner. I know plenty of people with money. Guess what? I'm not connecting him with them just because I know his personality and how he is. And it would end up like this, and I'd be the bad person for making the introduction to both of them, right?
He's like a bad penny, huh?
Pretty much. Yeah. So I just let him be on his own, and he finds his own money and does it how he wants to,
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take a quick second. I want to go ahead and share information for Scott and Omar one more time. If you want to take a quick screenshot for yourself to be able to reach out to them if you have additional questions. I really appreciate having you both here today. This is something that we've been waiting for, some content we've been anxious to bring, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks as well to see how we build on this conversation. Thank you both so much, because I think you gave a ton of value here, a lot of really good information, and there's a lot of to-dos, a lot of homework coming out of this for people who really want to step into this and build their reputation, to your point all along today. And establish investor relationships. So thank you very, very much, Omar and Scott.
Thank you.
And thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank you so
everybody
much,
for
everybody.
coming.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Have
don't
a good
forget,
day.
Jean will shoot me, make sure Tuesday, 11 a.m. we have Glenn Sanford joining us live. And he verified again this morning. So we are all set. So we'll see you next Zoom Tuesday, 11 a.m. www.leadersedgezoom.com. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.